Hey gentlefolk, my name is Malte Krug. Welcome back to another episode of All About Keys. In this month's episode of this series, we get to the issue that was the first one I actually bought in the day. Somehow the first two issues passed me when they got released, and for whatever reason, I didn't order them from the publisher's back catalog when I found out about them. But 15 years ago or so, I bought a complete collection of this magazine on eBay for cheap and got the seller to only send me the missing issues. And we already worked ourselves through those in the last two episodes, which you can find here and here. You read the title, so you already know which piece of gear I will show in detail this time. If you want to go directly to the gear review, just jump to this point in the video. And now, straight to the content of this month's issue of the Keyboard Magazin. As usual, they start off with a content list, letters to the editor, and the news. This time with some previews for products that will be presented at the Musikmesse in Frankfurt in 1985. In those days before the internet, visiting the Musikmesse was a major thing to do for interested musicians. I went there for the first time in 1992, but the reports from the Musikmesse in this magazine were always welcome to get the latest news at one place outside a music shop. Followed by an interview with Tangerine Dream, which were one of the two major columns of 1970s electronic music from Germany, besides Kraftwerk, of course. They were a huge influence worldwide. I see a lot of well-known classic synthesizers here on this splash panel photo. PPG Wave, that is a DX7, Jupiter 8, Emulator, JX3P, that might be a Polymoog, and some Oberheim. Oberheim Expander, I think that's an Apple II, and a Pro 1 by Sequential Circuits, and just a tiny bit of a Minimoog. PPG Wave 2, that is a lot of state-of-the-art equipment for 1984. And this might be a Waveturn. All the other photos in this interview are black and white, so the equipment isn't that good to see. There's the aforementioned Minimoog. I had the pleasure of working for them as a keyboard tech in 2005 when they performed a concert at the Shepherd's Bush in London. Here's a feature about the development of the piano through history. The author came up with a family tree using an old typewriter and a felt pen. Like I mentioned in another video, not a lot of people owned a home computer then, or a printer for that matter. In this month's Practical MIDI feature, they mention a very futuristic concept of recording MIDI tracks with different people. Sending the basic MIDI tracks via telephone using a so-called modem to some other musician that lives abroad, who then plays his solo or so and after that sends the altered data back. In a world of handwritten letters, fax machines and rotary dial telephones, this sounds a lot like science fiction for the regular user. And I guess that's why they also mention the more base possibility of just sending floppy disks back and forth by regular mail. In addition to last month's tech tip about using your home computer as a drum trigger device, here follows the corresponding software. Listings were printed here for you to copy by hand. And we did. In the second part of the Kurzweil 250 test, they show more of the innards and technology of the machine, like the keyboard mechanics. The concept of data reduction and the looping of samples is explained, and those were very new and unknown techniques in the day, when even ROM memory was very expensive and digital audio might have only happened to regular users in the form of the compact disc, which was also brand new then. The CZ101 has been Casio's first attempt to enter a more pro market with their keyboards. The CZs were fully digital and used a synthesis engine they called PD, phase distortion. It's similar to Yamaha's FM synthesis without reaching its versatility and crispiness. A whole range of synthesizers spawned from the CZ101, and these were very successful for Casio. This has been the first programmable synthesizer for a lot of musicians, which fitted the sound aesthetics they wanted then, in connection with a reasonable price tag. followed by the complete opposite, the Oberheim Expander, a classic synthesizer with a 5 times higher price tag, which, considering the sound and modulation possibilities, has been reasonable too. The back is sprinkled with a plethora of connectors, starting with the MIDI trio, stereo audio outputs, plus individual audio outs and CV and gate inputs for each voice. I worked with a few of these ages ago, but unfortunately never got the opportunity to get one for myself. This month's giveaway for new subscribers or people who add propositions for bettering the magazine by postcard is Yamaha CX5M music computer. I showed this machine in detail in the first episode of the series, just check it out here. The AX80, Akai's first synthesizer ever. They're more famous for the samplers like the S900 and S1000, which got released a few years later, and of course the MPC series. But they started into musical instruments with this one. I had my hands on one of these decades ago and really liked it. It's basically an 8-voice analog synthesizer with not a lot of knobs and faders for editing, but the display concept of this machine keeps you properly informed with those column graphics. The magazine gets rounded off with the usual workshops. Blues Basics Part 1, Drum Computer Groove Pattern Programming, the Sound Börse with sounds sent in from readers, Sound Analysis and Synthesis, Basic Knowledge about Music Theory, and some more. Like I mentioned in the first episode, these workshops in the day were for us what YouTube tutorials are nowadays. And now we are finally looking at this month's featured machine, the Yamaha RX11 digital drum machine. And as mentioned in the magazine test, here's not only the Yamaha RX11, but also its smaller sibling, the RX15. They got released at the same time. It's not smaller in size, obviously, but some functions are cut from that machine. Let me point them out for you. As you can see from having both front panels side by side, there are only 12 instrument pads compared to the RX11 16. There are also less drum samples to put on those pads. Yamaha also cut the RAM cartridge storage. So you would have to use a tape machine or MIDI drum to back up your valuable pattern creations. Nowadays, you could use a computer, of course. The extra red 2-digit display, which indicates the pattern number and can be read from farther away, is missing too on this one. I haven't changed the backlight on the RX15 yet, that's why it differs here, but both machines came with a lit display out of the box. But there's one major difference on the back panel, so let me rearrange these units for you to see. The RX15 lacks the individual audio outs of the RX11, which hinders you a bit when it comes to properly mixing the drum sounds, to which I will come back a little later in this video. With the RX15 sporting only stereo outputs, you have to stick to methods like I showed in last month's episode with the Korg DDM110. You can find it here. Let me move to the other table to show you the functions and sounds of the RX11 in detail. There you have it, the Yamaha RX11. For now I only connected 2 leads coming from the stereo outputs to my computer to show you the sounds of this machine and program some patterns. Later I will use the individual outputs to record each instrument to an individual track in the window so we could do some proper mixing. As you can see, the display has background illumination, which even the DX7 was missing. On the left we have 3 sliders, which are from left to right, a volume slider, the tempo slider, and the data entry. In songs you can pre-program the tempo and even tempo changes, but a slider for that function always comes handy. Down here we have the 16 instrument pads, and here are the sounds. Some of these have variations, so there are more than only 16 sounds available, and I will show them to you in a minute. To the left we have 4 buttons to be able to alter the panorama, the accent level, and the instrument level of each individual sound. So with the snare, for example, you want to change the accent level. Hit that. And it shows you the exit level. You can switch to all the other sounds and it'll show you the value of that. Instrument level is kind of a mixer, although it's only about volume. It shows the volume there. Same thing with the panorama. But now for the variations of the instruments. You gotta hit the function button and the instrument change. So it goes around in circles. Toms don't have any variations, but the bass drums do. Two different open hi-hats, two different closed hi-hats, and a pedal hi-hat. No variations with the cymbals, but with the cowbells. Two different rim shots and two different claps. The first one is more people than the other one. This is already a lot more flexible than what I showed you last month in the DDM 110, which only had its accent feature having an effect on all instruments on the same step in the pattern at once. Having dynamic pads would even be better, but Yamaha didn't add this feature into any RX model, not even the biggest one, the RX5 in 1987. But that one at least took and recorded dynamics when programmed through MIDI, by a keyboard or a drum pad, for example. On the right, there is a start button and the stop continue button. No record button, you ask? Well, for that you have to hit one of the two buttons up here to switch to real-time or step recording mode. The other buttons in the row can be used to copy patterns into other memory slots and to append two patterns into one longer one. The swing factor and the quantization resolution you have to set before you record anything. It won't have any effect on already recorded notes. Followed by the click resolution, which by default is on 1/8 for whatever reason. So we're going to switch that to 4th. And when you hit the tempo button, the BPM is shown in the display. When you switch to song mode, the pink functions under the buttons apply. Song mode is basically just a list of patterns which get played according to the set list, including repetitions and tempi changes. Even higher in hierarchy, there is the song chain, and it does exactly that. The lower row of buttons is for selecting the pattern or song number. And these buttons have other functions when you switch into function mode. Those are functions having to do with data storage and transfer, as well as MIDI. The sync button is to switch the RX11 from internal clock to MIDI clock or external clock, which can be just a click track. But now, let's make some patterns. Let's switch to real-time mode first. There we got the click. We can alter the tempo. And we can check on the display. If you made a mistake, just hit the clear button. It takes till the next round till you actually hear an effect, but let's put that back in again. Now I'm going to connect all the individual outputs into the window, and then we're going to do some mixing again. So here's what I did after recording patterns from the RX11 into my computer, utilizing the individual outputs. I programmed 2 different drum patterns which use some different sounds. Here's what the original patterns sound like without any effects or EQing done. The other one. First, some reverb might be nice. In a real mix, I would not necessarily let all the instruments run globally through the same reverb, but it sounds nicer while working on the drums. Of course, I prepared what I did to the track, so I'll switch on the stuff I've done to the sounds. In comparison to a real recording of live drums, you won't have to deal with gates other than for sound design reasons. Tracks won't need to be cleaned because all sounds come from a drum machine. There won't be bleed over from one into another track. You could use gates for sound design, like adding a click to the start of a sound, but I will use an envelope shaper instead for this. No bleed or room information makes recording sound less lively though. So mixing has to fix this a bit. Let's listen to the bass drum soloed. I EQ'd it a bit, gives it a bit more body, and to get some extra click, some envelope shaper. And next the snare drum. Some EQ to give it more high end. And envelope shaping like with the bass drum. Now for the hi-hat. I just did some EQing. Just adding some high end to these 12-bit samples. Toms 1-4, just get some EQing. Tom 1. Tom 2. Tom 3. And Tom 4. And some compression in the groove. Now for the crash. Just some EQ to make it sound a bit nicer, and some dynamics. Now for the shaker. This is a bit boring, so I tried to come up with something different. Adding some extra grooves with the mod machine, which is a delay, doing some funny stuff. And the flanger is messing around with the frequency. And, in addition, I automated the panorama a bit. And together, all this sounds like this. Adding some room. So far for the first pattern. Now for the other one, which sounds like this. Same tempo. So this pattern is pretty simple. Bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, and some claps. They got the same processing than the other pattern. And the claps are still bare. Let's see what I did. Nothing fancy. You're not forced to use presets which are made for drums. This is for guitar, and then it sounds like this. The RX11 and its little brother RX15 were the first of Yamaha's range of digital drum machines of the 80s, culminating in the RX5 and RX7. I will get to those later in the series. In the day, drum machines tried to sound more natural in using samples and not synthesized sounds, which got their comeback a decade or two later. Starting with the introduction of affordable hardware samplers and MIDI sequencers on computers, followed by the resurfacing interest in synthetic sounds and modern software samplers, ended the age of that breed of digital drum computers from whatever brand. Next month, we will finally focus on a synthesizer which got tested in the March 1985 issue of the German Keyboard Magazin. Thanks again for watching, and please consider to like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to stay informed as soon as I drop more interesting videos for you here. See you again soon on All About Keys.